She called 911 because I parked a pickup truck in my own garage. What happened next had the entire neighborhood watching and cheering. You won't believe how this HOA tyrant finally got exposed. Stick around till the end, because karma shows up with a vengeance. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. If you enjoy stories where justice hits hard, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more jaw-dropping neighborhood drama. The garage door groaned open with a low mechanical whine as I pulled my pickup truck into the driveway. The night air thick with the scent of damp grass and hot metal. The engine sputtered into silence, but the tension in my chest did not ease. Not tonight. Not in this neighborhood. Not with her around. I stepped out the cab boots, crunching on the gravel, the cool air brushing against my sweat-soaked shirt. I had just come from the shop, hands still smudged with grease eyelids, heavy from 12 hours of straight labor. All I wanted was to shut the door park in peace and shower the day off my bones, but then I felt it again, that prickle on the back of my neck, that sharp needlepoint stare from across the cul-de-sac. I turned slowly, eyes scanning the row of polished homes and neatly trimmed hedges, and there she was, right on cue. Karen stood at the edge of her lawn, arms crossed like a general surveying a battlefield, her blonde bob unmoving in the breeze, her lips pressed so tight it looked like they were fighting to stay on her face. "That truck!" she snapped, her voice slicing through the still night air like a whip. "Is that staying here?" I blinked, trying to gather some patience from a well long since dry. "I live here," I said, evenly, pointing at my two-car garage, "and that truck is staying in my garage where it belongs." She sniffed, stepping, forward heels clicking against the sidewalk like gunshots. "This is a residential neighborhood, not a junkyard. That vehicle is a commercial eyesore. It violates HOA Regulation 16.2-A. I exhaled slowly, clenching and unclenching my fists. "It is my personal vehicle, not a commercial truck, and the garage door will be closed. No one will even see it." "But I saw it," she said, jabbing a perfectly manicured finger toward my truck, as though it might bite her. "And now I cannot unsee it. I have to live with that image." I stared at her, wondering how a grown adult could make that sound like a trauma. "Are you seriously threatening me over parking in my own garage?" She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that held no warmth, just the cold glee of someone who believes they are untouchable. "I am not threatening," she said sweetly. "I am informing you of a violation and your responsibilities as a homeowner here under HOA guidance. And if you refuse to comply, there will be consequences." I gave a short, humorless laugh. "You mean fines over something you invented in your head?" She blinked slowly, then turned on her heel and walked away, her little white poodle trotting after her like a furry lieutenant. Her voice drifted over her shoulder. "You will be hearing from the board." I stood there for a moment, just breathing, just staring at the quiet house that was supposed to be my peace. My sanctuary. I had bought this place 6 weeks ago, after years of saving and sleepless nights, and over time, shifts, and already this woman was turning it into a battlefield. I finally pushed the truck into the garage, closed the door behind me, and went inside. The silence of my house felt louder than it should have, like it was waiting, holding its breath, with me. The next morning, sunlight crept through the blinds, warm and unwelcome. I walked to the front door, still rubbing sleep from my eyes, only to stop cold. A sheet of paper was taped across my door in bright red ink. One word jumped out at me. "Violation." I ripped it off, and read the rest: unauthorized parking of commercial vehicle in residential zone penalty, pending $25 per day. Non-compliance subject to board action. I stared at the paper. The absurdity almost too much to process. $25 a day for parking in my own garage. I stepped outside, and sure enough, there she was, again standing on her porch, sipping coffee from a mug that said "Live, Laugh, Lead," as if she had not just declared war over a parked truck. Her eyes met mine, and she smiled wide, lifted her mug in mock cheer, and went back inside. I wanted to march over and yell. I wanted to tell her she had no right. But something in her look stopped me. It was not fear. She had no fear. It was something worse: certainty. She believed the rules bent for her and broke for everyone else. Instead, I went back inside, shut the door, and stared at the violation notice for a long time longer than I should have my hands tightening around the paper until it crumpled like dry leaves. Later that day, I walked the neighborhood, looking around, noticing things I had missed in my move. In haze, a broken fence here, a car with expired tags there, lawn ornaments clearly outside HOA guidelines. Even Karen herself had a patio extension. Not listed in her property file. I had looked that up when she first came at me. It was not about rules. Not really. It was about control. And I knew it now. That night, as I stood in the garage polishing the hood of my pickup, a strange calm settled over me. I could still hear her voice ringing in my ears, smug and clipped. But it did not bother me, like it had earlier. She thought she had won. She thought I would roll over, but I was just getting started. And something told me this was going to get a lot messier before it got clean again. The next morning, I heard it before I saw it. The shrill sound of Karen's voice slicing through the air like an alarm clock from hell. I looked out the front window, and there she was, again pacing up and down her driveway. Phone pressed to her ear, brows furrowed in theatrical distress. She was pointing at my house, waving her free hand wildly, as if conducting an invisible orchestra of outrage. Her voice carried across the street, high and sharp. I am telling you right now, there is a massive vehicle parked illegally in the garage of number 37. It is obstructing the aesthetic integrity of the neighborhood. I want immediate action. I stared at her through the blinds, feeling my jaw tighten, my blood simmering low and slow. I stepped out onto the porch, arms folded across my chest, letting her see me, letting her know I heard every word. She froze for a moment, caught off guard that I was watching, then turned her back on me and kept talking. Lower now, more hushed, more calculated. 10 minutes later, a black and white patrol car rolled slowly down the street, the flashing lights off, but the engine humming loud enough to be a warning. I watched it pull to a stop right in front of my driveway, and my stomach dropped. Out stepped an entry, Officer Young, maybe mid-20s, clean-cut with a clipboard in one hand and uncertainty in his eyes. Karen was on him before he could even shut the door, her words spilling out like a dam burst. "Thank goodness you're here. Officer, this is an emergency. That truck violates neighborhood codes, and it's disturbing the peace, and possibly being used for illegal mechanical work. He has grease stains all over his driveway. It's a hazard, and I fear for my safety." The officer looked from her to me, then back again, clearly not buying the hysteria, but trying to keep the peace. He approached me, clipboard ready. "Sir, we've had a complaint about a vehicle parked improperly and potential code violations. Would you mind answering a few questions?" I nodded, slowly. "Sure, officer. It's my truck. It's parked in my private garage with the door shut. It doesn't leave oil stains, and it hasn't moved since last night." Karen cut in, "That's not true. He drove it in just yesterday. It's enormous and offensive and doesn't belong in a residential area." The officer raised a hand gently. "Ma'am, please, let me speak to him first." I appreciated that small gesture more than I expected. I led him to the garage and opened the door. The pickup sat perfectly still, perfectly clean, not a drop of oil on the floor, not a tool out of place. I kept my workspace tidy. No matter how hard I worked, he walked around it, took a few notes, scratched his head, and finally looked up at me. "Honestly, sir, there's no violation here. It's your garage, your property, no laws broken," Karen shrieked from the sidewalk. "You're letting him get away with this. This is favoritism. Do you know who I am? I'm on the HOA board." The officer turned slowly, his expression patient but firm. "And this is a civil matter, not a criminal one. Unless there's something you're not telling me, I can't take action on a parked truck inside a garage." She turned red, then purple. Then somewhere between volcanic and nuclear, she stormed back to her house yelling, something about lawsuits and internal reports. The officer gave me a nod and left without another word, but I knew better than to think it was over. Not with her. Not with someone like Karen. That night I received an email from the HOA with 3 attachments. The same violation notice from before, an additional fine citing non-compliance, and a formal complaint for neighbor misconduct. I stared at the screen, stunned by the audacity, by the sheer pettiness of it all. Then I laughed just once, short and sharp, and hollow, because now it was no longer about the truck, it was about me. She had made it personal, and I would not play defense anymore. I pulled up the HOA bylaws and started reading every line, every clause, every numbered regulation. I took notes. Printed pages, highlighted contradictions. I spent hours digging through public property records, scanning complaints, looking into Karen's voting history on the board. What I found made my pulse skip. Karen had a history, a trail of formal complaints, buried under the surface, filed by other residents for harassment, false reporting, and abuse of power. None had gained traction, none had stuck long enough, but they painted a picture. One I could use, she had a pattern, and I was just her latest target. Contacted 2 former residents who had sold their homes within a year of moving in. Both of them citing hostile interactions with the HOA, specifically with Karen. I recorded those conversations with their permission, stored everything on a secure drive, dated and organized. Then I created a new email using a different name and submitted an anonymous complaint to the HOA Ethics Committee, attaching the files, the recordings, and a detailed report outlining Karen's behavior pattern. I knew it wouldn't be enough to topple her, not yet, not directly, but it would create ripples and ripples, eventually form waves. The next morning she was back pacing again, yelling into her phone again, except this time there was something off in her stride, something tight in her voice, like she felt the ground shifting beneath her. She glanced at my house more than once, eyes narrowing like she sensed something had changed, but couldn't quite put her finger on it. And I stood behind the curtain, silent, watching, knowing the game had started and I had just made my first move. The storm was coming, and she had no idea it was already here. It started with whispers, quiet enough to be ignored, but loud enough to be noticed at first, just a few neighbors exchanging glances, when Karen passed a couple muttered comments under breath. Nothing more than the rustling wind through dry leaves. But it grew and spread like smoke through the cul-de-sac. I made sure of it. Without ever saying a word, the Ethics Committee sent her a notice, a polite inquiry requesting clarification on multiple complaints submitted over the past 6 months. An theme, informal investigation, nothing serious on paper, but it rattled her enough to shift her smile into something twitchy and strained. She knocked on my door the next day, sharp raps like a judge calling order. I opened slowly, knowing her face would betray, more than her words ever could. "Do you know anything about this?" she asked, holding up the printed email hand, trembling just enough to betray the facade. I blinked calmly, pretending not to understand. "About what?" "This," she snapped, waving the page. "Someone submitted a report to the committee, false allegations, slander, complete fabrications, and it's no coincidence it came right after your little police incident." "Well," I said slowly, "if someone has a problem with how the HOA is run, maybe they felt like they couldn't speak up unless it was anonymous." Her jaw tightened, eyes narrowing like a snake before a strike. "You think you're clever. You think you can turn people against me. But this neighborhood respects order, structure, tradition. Not loud-mouthed grease monkeys with oversized trucks and a chip on their shoulder." "Funny," I said, leaning casually against the frame. "Because, from where I'm standing, it looks like you're the one feeling threatened." She took a step forward but stopped. Herself, nostrils flaring, lips quivering, then, without another word, she turned and stormed off heels, clicking with less confidence than usual. 2 days later, someone egged my garage door. I came out to find yolk dripping down the panels, sticky and bright yellow in the morning sun, but I said nothing, cleaned it off in silence, and waved to Karen as she stood watching from behind her curtains. The next day, I found a note tucked under my windshield in bold red marker leave. "Now, before it gets worse." Still, I said nothing, just snapped a photo and filed it with the rest. Then came the meeting, the monthly HOA gathering, normally boring affairs filled with landscaping updates and recycling schedules. But this one was packed, every chair taken, voices tense, with something unspoken buzzing beneath the surface. Karen sat at the head of the table, gavel in hand, smile pasted on like a wax mask. She opened the meeting with her usual chirpy tone, but her eyes kept darting to the crowd as if scanning for cracks. Waited until new business opened, then stood slowly, every head turning toward me, the air heavy like before a storm. "I have something to present," I said, and pulled out the file copies for the board, each sheet marked and dated, detailing the pattern of abuse, the complaints from past residents, the violations ignored on her own property, the conflict of interest, votes where she ruled in favor of allies and punished dissenters. Karen laughed at first, brittle and sharp. "This is outrageous. None of this is relevant. It's a personal attack by a disgruntled homeowner." But the others were already reading, murmuring, turning to each other, some nodding slowly as the pieces clicked into place. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to accuse. I just let the facts speak for themselves. One board member cleared her throat and asked if the committee had verified the information. I nodded and said they were still reviewing, but the sources were all residents, former and current, with nothing to gain. But Peace Karen stood, hands trembling, papers shaking. "This is a conspiracy. You're all being manipulated. He's dangerous. He's using intimidation tactics. He's violating HOA spirit." But no one was listening. Not anymore. The board voted to suspend her. Temporarily pending formal review, she shouted that it was illegal that she'd sue, but her voice was drowned beneath a chorus of quiet approval. I walked out of that meeting into the cool night air, heart thudding with something that wasn't quite relief, not yet. but something close. That night she lost her crown, and she knew it, but it wasn't over. Not yet. Because the next morning at 6:30 sharp, I heard the sound of sirens and knocking, and when I opened the door, 2 officers stood there, one with a notepad, the other with a wary expression. "Sir, we received a report that you were operating an illegal auto shop out of your garage, unlicensed, and potentially hazardous." My stomach dropped, and I realized just how far she was willing to go. I led them to the garage again, spotless. Again, nothing out of place, just one truck, tools in drawers, clean floor, no signs of business, no signage, no money exchanged, just a man and his hobby. They left without incident again, but the sting remained. Because she had called 911, she had used emergency services over a truck, and now she had crossed a line. Even she could not walk back. That night, I stared at my garage door, the paint still faintly stained where the eggs had dried months of harassment, insults, and now criminal accusations, and for what controlled pride ego I knew what I had to do next, and this time it would be public. Because if she wanted a show, I would give her one, and she would never see the ending coming. The day of the neighborhood barbecue arrived, warm skies filled with the smell of grilled meat, and sunblocked kids running between sprinklers, laughter weaving through the air like confetti. Every driveway, open chairs, scattered coolers, cracked neighbors, milling together like some unspoken truce had settled over the street. I had never gone before, but this year I showed up, clean, shirt, tucked sleeves, rolled calm as the breeze, and I brought the truck, parked it right in front of my garage door, polished. To a mirror shine with a banner taped across the tailgate that read, in big, bold letters, "Ask me about HOA Karen." It took 5 minutes for the ripple to spread, 10 for the whispers to reach her lawn. By 15, she came storming across the street, face flushed, chest heaving, heels stabbing into the grass like spears. "What is the meaning of this?" she hissed, eyes darting to the neighbors watching their phones. Already out, some pretending not to record, but holding their cameras steady. Just the same. "You wanted attention, Karen," I said softly, hands in my pockets. "Now you've got it." She looked ready to explode, but she hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the forming crowd, realizing maybe for the first time that she no longer controlled the narrative. Reached into the cooler beside my chair, pulled out a USB drive, held it up between us, and said just loud enough for everyone to hear, "This contains every complaint, every voicemail, every video from every neighbor you've harassed over the past 2 years. It's been compiled into a formal report already sent to the city zoning board, the state HOA regulator, and a few friends in the media who love stories about power-hungry suburban tyrants." A murmur rolled through the lawn. Someone clapped once, slow and sarcastic. Karen's hands curled into claws, but she still hadn't spoken. "Not really. And if that's not enough," I continued, "it also includes footage from your own doorbell camera. Remember the night you egged my house, the one you forgot to delete from the cloud? I subpoenaed that, with help from a friend at the county office. It's admissible now." She opened her mouth, then shut it, opened it again, then turned to the crowd, her voice desperate. "He's lying. He's manipulating you. All he's dangerous. You're all falling for it." But no one moved, no one spoke, and every lens was on her, capturing every word, every twitch, every unraveling thread. One of the board members, a quiet woman who rarely spoke, stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on Karen's shoulder. Karen, it's over. The committee already voted to strip your position. Your access to board decisions has been revoked, and the emergency meeting tomorrow will be about your permanent removal. You can't do this, Karen gasped. I built this neighborhood. I kept it safe. I gave it standards. You terrorized your neighbors, the woman replied softly. That's not leadership. Karen stood frozen between rage and disbelief, eyes wide, mouth quivering before she turned on her heel and fled across the lawn back to her house, slamming the door behind her. So hard, the windows rattled. Silence followed for a long breath. Then someone laughed. Then another. And soon the whole block was chuckling. Not cruel, not mocking, just relieved, like the end of a long, bad dream. I sat back against the tailgate, took a sip of cold soda, and let it wash over me. The victory, not loud, not flashy, but earned and final. 2 days later, a for sale sign appeared on her lawn. Not a word from her, not a note, not a single knock. A week after that, she was gone. The HOA issued a new letter to the community outlining policy reforms, transparency measures, and a direct line for anonymous complaints, written in clear, respectful language and signed by the board with an apology to anyone who had suffered under Karen's rule. I opened my garage door every morning after that, without dread, without watching my back, just to grab a tool or wipe down the truck or drink coffee under the rising sun. Neighbors waved, kids rode past without fear, and the air felt lighter, like someone had opened a window in a room that had been shut too long. One afternoon, a little girl pointed at my truck and asked her dad if she could have one like it when she grew up, laughed and said, sure, if she worked hard enough and didn't let anyone tell her where she could or couldn't park it. I grinned and said, I'll save her a spot in the garage. And for the first time since moving in, this place felt like home, because the tyrant was gone, and the street was ours again.